The modern world runs on a form of magic. We retrieve our data from the cloud, we engage with inferential and generative AI models that can write code, we deploy enterprise software that manages global logistics. This entire digital transformation, from big data analytics to the SaaS applications on your phone, feels ethereal. But it's not. The entire ecosystem rests on a physical, tangible foundation. This is the capital blueprint, a map of the moats, monopolies, and leverage that define our world. A $500 billion global industry is dedicated to manufacturing one thing, the semiconductor. And the entire logic of this market, the very blueprint for our IT infrastructure, can be traced back to a single invention back in 1947. Before 1947, electronic computation was a physical brute force endeavor. The critical component of the early computers was the vacuum tube, a fragile glass bulb that controlled electric current in a vacuum. To build something complex, you needed thousands of them. The ENIAC, completed in 1946, was the icon of its era. It weighed 30 tons, it consumed 150 kilowatts of power, and filled a massive room. It was designed to calculate artillery firing tables for the United States Army's Ballistic Research Lab. It had no civil application, but its primary limitation was reliability. A vacuum tube would fail, on average, every 2 days. Finding the single failed tube in a matrix of thousands was a logistical nightmare. The longest uninterrupted period of operation without a failure lasted for only 5 days, reaching a remarkable 116 hours in 1954. This was the fundamental bottleneck. You could not build reliable enterprise-grade systems, even if you wanted to. You could not build a data center, and you certainly could not build a personal computer. The physical constraints of heat, power, and failure meant that the very concept of cloud computing or machine learning was not just impractical, it was physically impossible. The industry was waiting for a paradigm shift. That shift came from Bell Telephone Laboratories. Bell Labs was the research arm of the American telephone monopoly. It was, for a time, perhaps the most innovative scientific institution on the planet. In the 1940s, a team led by physicist William Shockley was tasked with creating a solid-state amplifier to replace the fragile vacuum tubes in the telephone network. On December 23, 1947, after numerous failures, physicists John Bardeen and Walter Brattain demonstrated the first successful point-contact transistor. The device was crude, but it worked. It amplified an electrical signal just like a vacuum tube, but crucially, it was made from a solid material, germanium. It required no vacuum, no heated filament, and consumed a tiny fraction of the power that a vacuum tube needed. Shockley, famously left out of the initial discovery, locked himself away and, in a fit of competitive genius, designed the far more practical and manufacturable junction transistor just a few weeks later. Bardeen, Brattain, and Shockley would share the 1956 Nobel Prize in Physics. The semiconductor age had begun. The invention was one thing, building a market was another. William Shockley, brilliant but notoriously difficult, left Bell Labs to found Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory in 1956. He chose Palo Alto, California, to be closer to his aging mother. This single personal decision would define the geography of the 20th century economy. Shockley recruited the best young minds in physics and engineering, but his abrasive management style proved disastrous. In 1957, 8 of his most brilliant employees, including Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, left en masse. Later, they became known as the famous Traitorous Eight. They secured $1.5 million in venture capital from Fairchild Camera and Instrument Corporation, who was an aerial surveillance equipment manufacturer, and founded Fairchild Semiconductor. This event is pivotal. It established a new capital blueprint for technology. Intellectual property, the abstract layer of value, funded by external venture capital, creating a new startup enterprise. Silicon Valley was born from this exodus. By 1958, transistors were in production, but they were discrete components. To build a computer, you still had to solder thousands of individual transistors onto circuit boards. This was the tyranny of numbers. The process was complex, expensive, and prone to human error. The solution was conceived almost simultaneously by 2 men, At Texas Instruments, Jack Kilby built the first crude integrated circuit by connecting components on a single piece of germanium and flying wires to connect discrete components. But at Fairchild, Robert Noyce designed the planar integrated circuit. He realized that you could print all the components and their connections onto a single, flat piece of silicon, a plane, with etched metal layers acting as the connections, enabling the application of photographic processing concepts like film negatives to obscure the projection of light on exposed chemicals. This process became known as photolithography. This was the real revolution. Noyce's method was more efficient and formed the basis for modern chips. Using photolithography, Fairchild could mass-produce entire circuits. This wasn't just miniaturization. It was a fundamental shift in manufacturing economics. The cost to produce one transistor or 1,000 transistors on a single chip was almost identical. This was the first glimpse of the infinite scalability at near-zero marginal cost that would one day define the software built upon this physical layer. In 1965, Gordon Moore, one of the Traitorous Eight and a Fairchild Semiconductor co-founder, observed that the number of transistors on an integrated circuit was doubling approximately every 2 years. This wasn't a law of physics, it was an economic observation. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy and roadmap of predictable miniaturization for the entire industry. While there are some diverging opinions, the law seems to largely stand as of 2025. This law dictated the terms of the new model. To stay competitive, you had to commit to massive, centralized capital expenditure. In 1968, Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore left Fairchild to found a new company, Intel. In 1971, Intel released the 4004. It was the first commercially available microprocessor. For the first time, an entire central processing unit was etched onto a single chip. This was the component that enabled the personal computer. This scaling of the physical layer was paralleled by a revolutionary shift in the abstract layer. In 1969, IBM unbundled its software from its hardware sales. This pivotal business decision was driven not by choice, but by necessity. The company was facing intense scrutiny from the US Department of Justice in a massive antitrust lawsuit. The Department of Justice argued that by giving away software and support for free with its physical machines, IBM was abusing its monopoly power and illegally preventing the growth of independent software companies. The unbundling was a defensive measure, but it ultimately validated the scalable value of software as a standalone, marketable product, setting the economic groundwork for the general-purpose computing revolution. The lawsuit itself did not end in a fine or a public trial ruling. It was dismissed in 1982 after 13 years of litigation. Ironically, the dismissal was based on the Department of Justice's conclusion that the case was without merit because the market had changed so fundamentally during the litigation that IBM no longer possessed the market power the government had initially sought to restrict. While IBM won the battle, the concessions and strategic decisions it made to avoid a guilty verdict allowed key competitors to win the war for market dominance, validating the ultimate purpose of the antitrust action and opening the door to more than 3 decades of Windows-Intel duopoly. The semiconductor market is now a $500 billion-plus global ecosystem. The immense capital cost, dictated by Moore's law, created high barriers to entry, forcing the industry to fracture into highly specialized domains. The era of one company doing everything, like Intel in the 90s, is over. We now have fabless companies like NVIDIA, AMD, and Apple who design chips but do not manufacture them. And we have foundries, chief among them TSMC, who invest hundreds of billions in capital expenditure to build the massive fabrication plants, or fabs, that produce these designs. And the chips themselves have specialized. The rise of artificial intelligence revealed that the architecture of a CPU was not efficient for machine learning. This task was better suited for graphics processing units. This is the link. Today's cloud computing giants, the hyperscalers like Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, are in a race to build data centers to power their cloud infrastructure. The abstract software layer, running everything from software as a service applications to music and video streaming services, is infinitely scalable. But its explosive growth, driven by AI, creates a recursive demand loop. It demands even more specialized, powerful hardware, funneling billions back to the designers like NVIDIA and the foundries like TSMC, driving further capital investment back into the physical infrastructure. The triumph of hyperspecialization that drove the industry's economic model, allowing TSMC to achieve unparalleled efficiency and dominate advanced chip manufacturing, is now the industry's single greatest geopolitical risk. Over the last 2 decades, global political stability allowed the West to outsource the physical layer's immense capital expenditure burden to Asia. Today, this has created a critical concentration risk: the world's reliance on Taiwan. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company is the linchpin of the global technology structure. They are responsible for fabricating over 90% of the world's most advanced chips, which power everything from the latest AI data centers and smartphones to advanced military hardware. In response to this vulnerability, the US and European Union have abandoned decades of free market policy and initiated a massive government-led effort to decentralize manufacturing. This marks a new era of industrial policy, directly intervening in the capital expenditure cycle. The US CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 is the cornerstone of this shift, allocating over $52 billion in grants, loans, and tax credits to incentivize the construction of advanced fabs on American soil. Similarly, the European CHIPS Act mobilizes over $49 billion in public and private investment. The primary goal is also de-risking through moving production home, to double the EU's global market share in semiconductors to at least 20% by 2030. The massive concentration risk in fabrication is further compounded by a critical single point of failure within the supply chain. The photolithography machine, specifically the extreme ultraviolet systems manufactured solely by the Dutch company ASML. EUV lithography is the process that allows chip manufacturers to etch patterns at the atomic scale below 7 nanometers. To achieve this, ASML's machines must perform an engineering feat unprecedented in manufacturing history. The system uses lasers to fire at microscopic droplets of molten tin inside a vacuum chamber, vaporizing the tin to create plasma. This plasma emits light at the 13.5 nanometer wavelength, which is then focused by highly precise, defect-free mirrors onto the silicon wafer. ASML machines are prohibitively expensive, costing over $200 million each. Only a handful of companies globally, TSMC, Samsung, and Intel, have both the expertise and the financial capital to purchase and operate them. This creates a technological monopoly at the most foundational point of the physical layer. ASML's dominance reinforces the competitive moats of the major foundries and validates the geopolitical strategy of controlling the supply chain. Because these machines are required for the relentless miniaturization dictated by Moore's law, ASML effectively acts as the global gatekeeper for advanced chip progress. Its unique position ensures that any company wanting to compete at the cutting edge must first negotiate with this single Dutch company, solidifying the concentration of leverage at the top of the entire ecosystem. The model's fundamental power lies in its compounding leverage. The monumental expenditure required to build and equip a modern fabrication plant, often exceeding $20 billion, does not just act as an operational cost. It functions as an impenetrable economic moat. The price of entry into the manufacturing sector dictates that only a handful of state-backed entities or highly profitable global leaders can compete. This absence of new, disruptive competitors rewards the existing players, such as TSMC and ASML, with a disproportionate market share. Every time the cost of a leading-edge fab increases, the competitive advantage of the incumbents increases as well. Just as well, this cycle ensures that the massive revenue generated by the abstract software layer flows back not to a fragmented competitive market, but predominantly to a highly consolidated, protected group of hardware companies, leading to geometric returns for their investors. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe now and turn on notifications. Next week, we trace the birth and flow of capital in modern commercial real estate,